Good morning, everyone. My name is Matt Ewald. I serve the Texas Tribune as Senior Director of Events and Live Journalism. Welcome to those joining us in person here in Austin and those joining us online for the second conversation in our series, kind of bridging the gap between tech world and tech industry and the legislature, titled Tech and the Texas Lege, Blockchain and the Future Economy. Today, we are joined by Cesare Fracassi, Associate Professor of Finance and Director of the Blockchain Initiative at Texas McCombs School of Business at the University of Texas at Austin. Carol Haines, Head of Power and Policy at Core Scientific. And Jamie McCavity, CEO at Cormant Data Systems. And by the way, Jamie is replacing our speaker, Lee Bratcher, president of the Texas Blockchain Council, who wanted to be here, but storms up in Dallas prevented him from joining us, but he was able to recruit Jamie to join us. We'll go ahead and have the panel come on up and join us on stage. Our program will run an hour with 45 minutes of moderated conversation and 15 minutes of Q&A. So that we can get to as many questions as possible today. We'll be doing our Q&A through our Q&A portal at texastribune.org/ask. You can find some signage at the back of the room here in our studio with a URL and QR code to make it easy for everyone. And if you want to go old school and write your question on a note card, we're happy to do that as well. Thank you to all those around the state who make the journalism of the Tribune, including events like this, possible by becoming Texas Tribune members. To learn more and to become a member, you can visit texastribune.org/support. We recently announced the dates for our 15th Texas Tribune Festival, November 13th through 15th, here in downtown Austin. TribFest isn't just another political event. It's where big ideas meet real action. As an attendee, you'll join conversations shaping the future of education, the economy, healthcare, energy, technology, public safety, culture, and the arts, and much more. Joining those driving decisions in Texas across the nation. Tickets go on sale this spring. And tomorrow, right after this, we head to Houston, where we will hold a day-long symposium titled A Blueprint for Texas Cities, Growth, Challenges, and Opportunities, timed with a recent publication of the Texas Metropolitan Blueprint, which lays out a 5-year policy agenda to ensure long-term prosperity for the state's 26 metropolitan areas, home to 90% of the Texas population. You can learn more about this and our other events around the state at texastribune.org/events. So let's get to today's program. Cesare Fracassi is an associate professor of finance at the University of Texas at Austin, where he leads the Blockchain Initiative and the FinTech Research Lab. Recently, he was a member of the State of Texas Work Group on Blockchain Matters and on academic leave as the chief economist of the Coinbase Institute. His primary research is in the area of corporate finance and financial technology. Carol Haines, Head of Power and Policy at Core Scientific, has nearly 20 years of experience working in the energy industry with a strong background in energy's infrastructure, deregulated markets, site selection, and economic development. And I mentioned a few minutes ago, Jamie McCavity, CEO of Cormant Data Systems, joins us today as at the last minute. We really appreciate him taking time, and we'll have Jamie introduce himself in just a second. And moderating today's program is Matthew Watkins, the Texas Tribune's editor-in-chief, a position he has held since September. He joined the Tribune back in 2015. I thank our panelists for joining us today, and with that, I turn the program over to Matthew.
Thank you, Matt, for the introduction. Thank you all for being here, especially Jamie, who got the call about 30 minutes ago. So ran into the phone booth and changed and got ready for this. So we're going to talk a lot about, the industry, blockchain, Bitcoin industry in Texas, what's coming up in the Texas legislature, particularly around issues of power generation in the grid and everything like that. But I first want to just start by setting the baseline here. I suspect, particularly people watching online, there might be a wide range of sort of background and expertise on this topic. So, Cesare, can you just give us your sort of elevator pitch for the blockchain and cryptocurrencies? What is this technology? Why is it so important? Why should we be paying attention to it right now?
Absolutely. So I teach fintech and crypto to students. So I'm gonna teach these as a few of my students. So let's start with the problem. So what is the problem? The problem in finance is that you have a bank account, you have an insurance company, you have a place where you trade your stocks, you have a place where you pay each other, merchants, and so on. The issue is that all these services are all very siloed, meaning that the bank doesn't talk to the brokerage very well. Everything is not on the same platforms. And so that creates issues because it creates friction, it's slow, it's expensive. And the reason is because all these services are not sharing the same platform. So we would like to basically have all the services on a same system. Think about your operating system on your phone. You want to have a platform where you can design apps and so on. The problem is that who controls this unified platform? Well, maybe big tech could control this platform, but it's problematic. We don't want a single entity like Apple or Google to control this critical economical and financial infrastructure. Do we want the government to control and own the infrastructure? Well, that's problematic. This is actually what China is trying to do, is trying to basically control all economic activity in China. So maybe there is a third way. And the third way is to have a decentralized system where no one is in charge of the platform because it's decentralized enough so that all the nodes in a network come together to a consensus of approving transactions. And so the biggest, my elevator pitch for crypto is we want to have a common infrastructure that is hopefully not controlled by anyone, where you can exchange value. We can trade stocks, we can pay people, you can have applications we're called smart contracts, and they're all going to be interact with each other. So the services are going to be very cheap, very fast, and very convenient. So we would like to get there. Crypto is not there yet, but that's the idea. We would like to get to a place where all people in the world, this is not just in the US, all people, the 8 billion people in the world can interact with each other, transact, offer services, all in a single platform. That's the idea. And I think crypto is one way to get there.
You say we're not there yet. Tell me more about that.
Okay, obviously, so the problem, one possible solution is crypto. The problem with blockchain technology is that it's a distributed network, and it takes time, and it's not as efficient as a single centralized service. And so people have been working very hard over the last 10 years to make this blockchain faster, cheaper, and more user-friendly. Because right now it's still a little the user experience is still a little clunky, but you see the potential there. I can be, I'm Italian, I can be in Italy and offer a financial service, a swapping service, a borrowing and lending to anybody else in the world currently. Now we are not there because the user experience is not there. We're still defining the infrastructure. Now we have layer 1, layer 2s, and the apps don't work as seamless as we would like it to be. So we're still building it. But I'm confident we're going to be in a situation in which we're going to offer a platform that works well, is intuitive like using your phone, and it allows you to connect with anybody else in the world.
Okay, I have one more basic question before we launch into the specifics here. You talk about the decentralized nature of this. That's where the actual blockchain technology of this comes in. Tell us a little bit about how that network is sort of formed and works.
So the way it works is simple, meaning that anyone in the world can join the network. This is what's called permissionless system. Basically, if I want to join the network, or if you guys want to join the network, you just download a software and you just run in your computer. And then you participate in the network. That's the beauty of it, that anyone in the world can be a node in the network that contributes to validate and approve or deny transactions. And the blockchain system is a system in which everyone has the incentive to do the right thing, meaning to approve good transactions and denied invalid transactions. So that's the high-level understanding of how the consensus works.
All right, sounds good. And of course, the biggest sort of use of this so far has been the rise of Bitcoin. And one of the things we're going to talk about quite a bit here is Bitcoin mining. Jamie, this is what your company is involved with. Tell us a little bit about, first, your company, but also about that process of Bitcoin mining. What goes into that in your company?
Like the professor mentioned, Bitcoin mining is a process of achieving a consensus amongst a sort of a large group of participants who none of whom is actually charged with making a yes or no decision. So that it's a decentralized process. Cormint is a Bitcoin mining company. We do business exclusively in Texas. We're headquartered in West Texas. I've spent my entire life in commodity markets. I was a crude oil trader on the floor of the New York Mercantile Exchange before I started this company. And we saw the Texas electricity market as a great opportunity for the industry. Us and many other firms like Core have relocated a huge portion of our business to Texas. Texas is actually the leader in the United States in terms of Bitcoin mining capacity, and the United States is #1 in the world. So we're #1 of the #1 here in Texas. And Bitcoin mining is a complicated thing to explain, because if you explain to somebody how it works, they'll say, well, why do you need to do that? And the important thing to start with is what the professor said. The goal of the system is for the system to function without any single company, entity, government deciding the rules or the outcomes of the system. And effectively, so start there. The way that Bitcoin mining accomplishes that is effectively the world's largest guessing game, where each guess costs a small quantity of a watt of electricity. So like a micro watt of electricity gets you one guess at this guessing game. If you are the winner of the guessing game, you are awarded effectively the privilege of proposing a new set of transactions to be added to the global transaction state. So new transactions get added to the Bitcoin network via mining, and you have to win this guessing game in order for that privilege of adding these new transactions. The first thing that everyone else on the network does as soon as you propose the new transactions to be added is they try to disprove you. So there's this constant check and balance tug of war where miners are spending electricity to compete for the privilege of adding new transactions to the global system, and all the other miners try to disprove them immediately. It's a very high-level way of describing how the system achieves a consensus, how we can pay each other for things in the real world using Bitcoin. Everyone can be assured that the transaction is finalized, but there is no actual authority in the system. It's a decentralized consensus.
So I'm going to try to overly simplify that for you, and tell me where I'm wrong or if I'm wrong here. So basically, the idea here is that Bitcoin miners are doing that guessing process, and when you essentially correctly guess what combination of numbers is that essentially?
It's effectively a very small number. You're trying to guess a very small number of a massive data set potential.
And if you succeed in that, essentially you are getting access to Bitcoin. Is that right?
Yeah, so miners are competing for a reward that's issued by the network. That reward gets cut in half every 4 years. It's through that halving process that Bitcoin has a fixed number of units. So what effectively humanity gets in return for the system that miners run is humanity gets a money system that has a fixed quantity that anybody can use if they have an internet connection and a very low-level computer, and they're able to hold their own money, be their own bank, and spend their money or receive their money however they want. So you get a completely free monetary system that's based in the digital world, and the miners are effectively the contract service providers who are ensuring that the system keeps running.
And because of the scarcity, and because which gives it value, right? The scarcity and the interest into using the cryptocurrency, or in this particular case, Bitcoin. But also because there's so much interest in it, it requires a lot of computers to profitably and successfully, mine Bitcoin, and that's what kind of leads to the question that we're going to sort of transition to now, which is the power usage around this.
Yeah. So Bitcoin, I mean, Core will they'll tell you this better than anybody. Bitcoin is the right way to think of it is like a very price sensitive consumer of electricity. Bitcoin mining, because each guess at the Bitcoin mining reward requires a small quantity of electricity, it's very, very sensitive to the cost of electricity. And by the very nature of it, Bitcoin mining will only thrive in areas where there's very low demand for electricity. Most people don't know this. West Texas is the renewable energy capital of the entire country. There is an abundance of very cheap solar and wind energy out there. And so this guessing game is always flowing to areas that has very, very low cost power. Core's other businesses, AI and HPC data centers, where not so sensitive to the cost of electricity because you're installing, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars of very, very high performance computing equipment to perform AI. That is much less sensitive to the cost of electricity, and that thrives closer to major population centers.
Yeah.
Sorry to answer for you.
It's great.
Well, this sort of where I was looking to transition to anyways. I mean, Carol, Texas has really emerged as a leader in this, particularly since 2021. That was the year that China banned mining, and you saw a lot of folks shift to America, particularly Texas. I mean, tell us just a little bit more about what is the atmosphere in Texas that caused it to be, the national leader in this.
Sure. If you don't mind, I'm going to step back for 5
Absolutely.
quick seconds just to talk about maybe a real life example of how people can use Bitcoin. I know we talked a little bit about it, but if you think about the fact that I think approximately 10% of Americans are unbanked or don't have a bank account. And that could be for any number of reasons. It could be because they can't afford the ATM fees, the minimum, balance charges. It could be because there's not a bank in their neighborhood or on a bus route that they have access to, things like that. And if you think about the fact that those people are probably going to a paycheck service place that might be taking as much as 30% of their paycheck to cash their paycheck for them, or a local bodega that's taking a cut of their check. Bitcoin brings a pretty incredible opportunity for people to reduce and eliminate those fees. So when we talk about those fees, that's just one real life example of how elimination of those fees puts more money in someone's pocket and makes their life a lot more simple in order to be able to transact on their phone with just the ability to have Wi-Fi, whether it's at their house or at a public place like their, place of work or somewhere in the community like a library. So I just thought I'd mention that. But on the question related to Texas, many Bitcoin miners were already looking at Texas. The fact that it's a fully deregulated market gives a lot of flexibility with power price and a lot of growth opportunity here. We've certainly seen some challenges in the last couple of years with load growth just across the country, not just in ERCOT alone. But as Jamie alluded to, 60% of the hash rate across the United States is currently happening in Texas. That's just amongst publicly traded miners. So our instinct is that it's probably a little bit higher across all of the miners. I know the Texas Blockchain Council just in collaboration with a number of miners, I think there were 9 of us that collaborated, just finished a study that was done by the Perryman Group that talks about the economic impact of mining, and the fact that that study showed that $4 billion were invested in 2024 just in Texas alone. And it represented 12,000 employees just in 2024 alone, which is about 40% of at least that study's results of investments across the country. I think the biggest draw for Texas is the fact that there's an abundant amount of power here, and there's a marketplace that really allows miners like us to be flexible. Miners are price sensitive. Our margins are very dependent upon what power rates are, but we actually have the opportunity to be additive to the community in the fact that we curtail and turn off when prices are high. So we're not causing prices across the state to be higher. If anything, we're often pulling them down because we're helping support generation, we're helping support transmission growth, we're helping support new assets coming online, whether they're renewable or baseload generation assets, and we're going offline when prices are highest, so we're becoming more additive.
So this is the sort of concept of demand response, the idea that when demand is low, the mines will be running, which will incentivize more power generation onto the grid. And then when demand is high, y'all have the ability to very quickly shut off the power, which will then make it accessible to, the rest of the state when it might need it during a really hot day or a really cold day or anything like that, right? That being said, the growth of this industry has led to a pretty long line of companies looking to kind of access the grid, right? And that has led to ERCOT, our grid regulator, to estimate, a significant growth in power demand over the next, really the rest of this decade, right? From 85 gigawatts in 2025 to 150 gigawatts in 2030, a report said last year. Excuse me. And so we're basically talking about almost a doubling in the course of 5 or 6 years. First of all, whoever wants to take this, can someone explain to me the sort of that concept of the queue of people looking to tap into the grid? What's going on here, and how is that working?
Sure, I'll take it, and then I think Jamie will definitely have comments to add. So a few years ago, ERCOT established a large load task force, which is a process that said any projects over 75 megawatts needed to go into the ERCOT queue to get approved to come online. The transmission service providers were doing their own load studies, as they still are, that was administering when new loads could come online and how they could come online. But ERCOT decided that they wanted to have a secondary checkpoint for that process, which makes sense. They were concerned about grid stability after Winter Storm Uri and really wanted to make sure that they had a pulse on what was happening across the entire grid. That led to the development of a queue for loads over 75 megawatts. The challenge that exists, my understanding is that queue, as it sits today, is about a 2 to 3 year queue process for projects to get approved and growing. And that's just not an ERCOT phenomenon. That's something that's happening across the country. But the difference with ERCOT is that there are a few things that they could do that would help the process in that. And this is part of Senate Bill 6. I will say that they're looking at the rules associated with the ERCOT queue. And some of the suggestions from miners like us are that they look to see which projects are real. And I say that because there are a lot of people out there that were thinking that they could make a lot of money off of this influx of new customers or potential new customers. So you had everyone from landowners that had large land that would file interconnection requests just to sort of kick the tires to determine if their lands could be more valuable. There were agents and brokers that are out there, whether part of the energy space or different landman type people that were looking to see how they could monetize this. And so not all of the load requests actually have real projects behind them. In fact, I would say a significant portion of them are either redundant because they could be one project that may have 10 interconnection requests because they are looking to determine which site could come on fastest, or they could be a landowner that's just trying to understand if their site is worth more than they originally thought it was. So a couple of the suggestions that we have on how to alleviate that problem are to charge a fee for ERCOT to charge a large load study fee, which could be $100,000 or more, just as a suggestion. I think that's a TBC suggestion specifically. To have, when the request is submitted, to have more information available about the request. Are there other requests across the state and other jurisdictions? If so, is it for one project that you're going to place or multiple projects? That way you can understand if the request is redundant, to then further understand what type of project it would be. Would it be an interruptible load like a Bitcoin mine, or would it be maybe a traditional data center that's not interruptible? And then finally, have an expiration date on it. So right now, when a load request is granted, there's no expiration date on there. So it's just sitting out there, and there's no way for ERCOT to tell if that load will actually come online or if there's a project behind it.
Okay, very good. I want to talk a little bit. I want to get into the details of SB 6, but I also, before we do that, I want to talk about some of the, I guess, criticisms or concerns raised about the growth of this industry. I mean, you mentioned sort of the big one, right? Which is that we all remember Winter Storm Uri. We all remember, how the grid barely held up in that situation. And I think people, including some state leaders, see that projection of a 90% increase in demand over 5 years, and they think, this is scary, right? How can we handle that growth when we could barely handle the situation before? I mean, you've already kind of talked a little bit about some of the potential benefits of having that increased demand and the ability to go offline, but I mean, there is a sort of argument being made, particularly by environmentalists and folks like that. This is harming our ability to cut energy consumption. This is putting us in a tough situation for what they would argue is a minimal societal benefit. What would you say to that argument?
Well, I would say that cutting energy consumption generally, at least based on what we can observe in developed society over the last few centuries, it generally is correlated with a lower quality of life, lower productivity. People don't have access to basic services, and an outlook where we use less energy as a species is not really the goal here. I think people, they want that to be an outcome because they are alarmed about climate change. And so they're saying, just stop using energy, and they're upset, and that's an emotional reaction, and that's understandable because they're upset and they're worried about the future. But probably the right answer, well, what I think is absolutely the right answer is we should be using more energy. Energy is tightly correlated with prosperity and quality of life. And we do have a miraculous fuel that can deliver around-the-clock energy that is carbon-free, and that is nuclear energy. We also have a whole lot of natural gas here in the state, and that is ready to be turned on. West Texas has a natural gas pipeline terminal of sorts called Waha, and natural gas there is often negatively priced. They're giving the stuff away. So we've got plenty of energy here to meet the demands of the future, to give a high quality of life to all Texans, to hopefully gain dominant market share in AI, which is most clearly going to be one of the key industries of the next century. So we could win that market. We could also win Bitcoin mining here. We could use hydrocarbons that are in the ground in West Texas, and we could become a leader in nuclear energy for the next 100 years to come. That is the win here. The win is not to use less energy. It's, if this is really important, we should continue using energy, but let's make a conscious effort to use nuclear. There's fewer than, I think, 5 gigawatts of nuclear in the state of Texas as it is now. That number could easily go way up. And it actually is. There's a new project just got announced in the Abilene area. On a federal level, the regulatory environment looks great for nuclear as well. So that's my strong opinion on that subject.
All right, let's talk about SB 6. This is the major piece of legislation that would address some of these concerns. I'm going to try to list off some of the major provisions. And this is, again, the Matt tries to explain something, and y'all tell me if I'm wrong or right here, segment of the event. First of all, one that you already mentioned, Carol, is it calls for research to determine whether load users have, oh, actually, hold on, I'm getting off already, require companies waiting for large loads to disclose whether they have applications in other parts of the country or other places, right? And this is sort of what you're talking about, is if you might be exploring different sites, you might have, gotten into the queue in different areas. You're probably only going to use one of those. Therefore, the expected demand might actually be higher than what the realistic incoming demand is, right? Is there, A, did I describe that right? B, like, what's the industry's feeling on this? Is this a good plan, a useful plan for the state in terms of meeting that demand?
I think so. I mean, we definitely know, I can talk for Core Scientific specifically. We have run 3 nationwide RFPs looking for sites. And while that's a reverse process because we're going out to the market and asking them what those sites are, what sites are available and what power is available at those sites, that's likely, the last RFP that we ran about a year ago was to cite 5 locations, and we got tens of thousands of responses across the country. If you think about that in reverse, for someone who's not issuing an RFP and they're just going to different points across the country where they think their power and putting load study requests in, especially like ERCOT right now where they're free, they're just looking to see what's out there and what's available, and they may cite a very small percentage of those projects.
Okay, another aspect of this minimum transmission fee, which basically means there are many, major large users that will access large loads of electricity that might be right next to a power plant, or basically have their own power generation on site, and that would at times possibly allow them to avoid paying higher costs for the transmission of electricity back and forth. This would set a minimum fee that would ensure that even those folks that are participating in the grid are having to pay some transmission costs to sort of help offset the cost of transmission around the state. Did I describe that correctly?
You did, and the elephant in the room here is there's, like you pointed out, there is a projected doubling of electricity demand. You can't just do that by building more power plants. You have to upgrade the size and increase the number of transmission lines that are going through the state. The major transmission corridors of the state are really west, northwest to central, west to central, south to everywhere. And those congestion, that there is extensive congestion on those transmission lines, meaning effectively they are full. And it would be ideal if we could connect a lot of the renewable energy in the western part of the state to central Texas. Northern part of the state has a lot of renewables as well. Being able to connect the grid better and allow much larger pathways of electricity to flow around the state. That's the goal. It ain't free. It's going to cost $30 billion. And the legislation that's been proposed effectively, the way that transmission charges are allocated currently is based on how much electricity you're using when the system is at peak capacity. The idea being that we've already got these existing transmission lines, and those are, I'm not going to call them free to use, but they're not trying to determine the charges to use those lines. They're trying to determine the charges for using an incremental amount of transmission capacity. So they take how much electricity you're using when the system is running at peak, meaning all the transmission lines are flowing at their highest levels of the entire year, and then whatever percentage of that number you are, that's what your transmission charges would be, and you pay them 1 year in advance. So they measure you in 2025, then you pay that amount throughout 2026. What this bill effectively is addressing is it's saying, okay, we're going to not only measure that peak usage, but we're also going to include a minimum charge based on average usage or around the clock usage. It's actually not known right now, based on the current iteration of Senate Bill 6, how they're going to calculate that. What they're doing is basically telling the Public Utility Commission of Texas, hey, we want you guys to study this and come up with a good method here that's going to more fairly allocate these transmission charges. And then that is going to become a rule after the PUC decides that.
Okay, a couple other pieces, and then I want to ask just sort of overall, right? One would be a program that would allow ERCOT to competitively bid power use reduction and give them 24 hours notice, right? So when we know that we're possibly reaching dangerous or high times, ERCOT can financially incentivize companies, high power users, to stop using power. Usually, they basically want to extend the time that they can do that, give them 24 hours notice, give them a little bit of more buffer. And the other one, PUC, Public Utility Commission approval for any data center before it purchases the output of existing coal, gas, or nuclear power generation. It would basically have the right to say that those users would need to ramp down, how much power they're using during those high power events. So again, kind of creating more mechanisms to reduce demand during those dangerous times. I want to say, let me just ask you, I'll direct this to you, Professor. I mean, give me your reaction to this bill kind of all around. What is the impact of this measure? I know it could change a lot between now and June, but what's this going to mean for both the grid and for the industry in Texas?
So first of all, I'm not a grid expert. So like these two people know a lot more than I do about this. But my overall feeling is that we need to figure this out. So the state of Texas, the mantra is we're open for business. We want businesses to come to Texas, open plants, open new factories, and so on. And we cannot say, hey, come here, and by the way, we're going to give you power in 3 years from now. And so again, I cannot speak to the details of the bill, but we need to be ready for having extra energy capacity for the next 3 years.
Do y'all think that this would accomplish that goal?
So there's kind of a couple of components of it. With Bitcoin, you don't need to pay us to turn off. We're going to turn off. Bitcoin miners do not want to consume electricity uneconomically, and we can define our break-evens in seconds, and we can adjust on the fly to changes in power market pricing. Our equipment, generally speaking, is much less sensitive to a shutdown than something like a steel mill, for example. So the 24-hour shutdown notice, that is more accommodative for industrial users of electricity who require a little bit more heads up. So that's going to bring them into the fold and have that demand response component be something that ERCOT can pay for and procure from those industrial users and then rely on them to turn off. As far as the other components of the bill, generally speaking, that's what the bill is after. We're going to build a lot of transmission. We're going to try to accommodate every single one of these new industries here. We're going to figure out who's going to pay for it and change the rules to make sure that all of the industrial customers pay as close to their fair share as possible. And I think there's a safety component as well. I actually love this bill. It's not going to be, it's going to cost my company money, but I think it's really good for the state. So I'm generally supportive of it. The cautionary component of the bill, which I do think is very important, is the fact that they're not going to let an existing reliable resource be taken off the marketplace to service an around-the-clock AI data center type of load. So let me give you an example of this. You've got a 1,000-megawatt natural gas plant that's a critical reliability resource for the state during extreme weather events. So these are the type of plants that kept the grid running during Winter Storm Uri. They keep the grid running during the hottest days of the summer. And because the state is increasingly made up of solar and wind generation for new power generation additions, we need to make sure that the power plants that we can turn on, turn up, maximize output during those critical weather events, we need to make sure that those are available to service retail customers. And because of the enormous demand from AI to have a power source that's available around the clock, meaning 99.999% of the time, that would mean that resource potentially is generating and consuming electricity during weather emergencies. Bitcoin miners will be long gone during weather emergencies, but you would be effectively taking a gas or nuclear plant that's available during weather emergencies to service retail and you'd be diverting that to a data center load. The state is saying, no, that's not going to happen. We need to make sure that our reliable resources, which we don't have enough of at the moment, are available to service the grid and importantly, the residential customers when we have weather emergencies. There are some provisions in this bill that say, if you build a data center and you build backup generation, so if you have natural gas generators right there at your site and you're willing to kick those on during emergencies so that we can still have that power to bring to mom and pop at home, and you can keep running and you contractually obligate yourself to do that, then that's all good. But they're not going to allow thermal resources to be taken out of the grid mix because those are the most important ones for reliability.
Carol, do you also love this bill?
It's super beneficial, absolutely. As Jamie said, we sit in a little bit of a different spot than Cormant, but I agree with everything he said. So at Core Scientific, we've got a Bitcoin mining facility in West Texas, actually very close to Cormant's facility. And then we've got a relatively, I'll call it small AI data center in Austin, and then a larger data center in Denton, Texas, that was previously a Bitcoin mining facility that is now converting over to AI and high performance compute. And I agree with what he said related to allowing the rules to enable backup generation to be a part of the overall plan. I think right now there is just a lot of ambiguity in Senate Bill 6 related to what the rules are. And I think the challenges in a lot of the testimony that was given last week talks to this. If the rules aren't clear, people won't come and they won't build it because they won't understand the economics of their project. And so if we can get to a point where the rules are more clear and there is a value in even large data centers being able to use their backup generation. I know Jamie talked a little bit about that, but there are very strong demand response programs in other parts of the country that allow for that and provide an economic incentive that can actually help offset the cost between, let's say, a diesel backup generator and a natural gas backup generator, which would be more environmentally beneficial.
Yeah, I want to talk just briefly about some of the criticisms or concerns around demand response. You know, there was a lot of attention brought back in 2023, back in August, when we had a series of very hot days in which ERCOT was kind of repeatedly putting out conservation notices and everything like that. It later came out that one of the mining companies had made $32 million that month in conserving power in order to protect the grid. They were incentivized by ERCOT to do that, raising questions about, is this part of the business model to support that? There's also been a sort of similar but different criticism of this, which is, why doesn't the state incentivize everyday power users? Why can't I get any kind of financial incentive in my house for turning off the lights and the AC or whatever else? Why is it only the large load users that do that? I'm curious what y'all think of either of those two.
I really want to die on this hill if it's okay with you. So this is probably one of the dumbest things that you will read in the media. I mean, that is saying something, but this in particular, it completely ignores the basic premise of having any understanding of market economics, where you can get paid to turn off power, but first you got to buy power, right? So we know who we're talking about. We're talking about Riot, right? In 2023, record hot summer for Texas. Riot wisely bought a lot of electricity in the years leading up to that year. So Riot was long power heading into summer 2023, and then it was really hot. You should be able to make money if you have a view on the weather being very, very hot and electricity prices are cheaper than where you think it will be. It's important that you be able to go and buy that commodity in advance if you're running a business. That is functioning commodity markets 101. That's happening in every single commodity market in the United States. That's how a market economy works. It's capitalism at work. There's nothing wrong with that. The thing that people ignore here is, look at summer 2024. If you went into summer 2024 with a power hedge, you got smoked. I'm talking about you lost tens of millions of dollars with that same hedge that Riot made money on in 2023. Look at Iris Energy. Iris Energy paid almost $10 million to unwind a bad power hedge during summer 2024. So in order to be paid to shut down, you've got to own that energy. And ERCOT is effectively basically buying an option to take your energy back. If you don't own any energy heading into that, you cannot be paid. And so the reason why this is important for a functioning and strong market economy in Texas is because Riot is going into the forward power market and pre-buying its electricity. The other side of that trade is a power plant. And that power plant is looking at how much demand is there for power in this market. Should we build more power plants? Do we need to order more natural gas turbines? Should we build a nuke plant? Should we build wind? Should we build solar? And Riot is sending them a signal in the forward power market that says, yes, we want to buy power from you. We're willing to lock in a price, and we're willing to be there for 10 years. And yes, also, we're going to offer ERCOT the ability to shut us down on the hottest days. And so, the ability to buy long-term power contracts in a forward commodities market sends a very important signal to the generator community. And then the ability for ERCOT to effectively buy an option to take that power back, that's a reliability service. So I think people are, because it's a Bitcoin mining company, for some reason, these arrangements have been happening for a century in this country. Demand response procurement, forward power hedges, call it whatever, functional commodity markets. Because it's a Bitcoin mining company and they happen to put a good trade on, and then they got paid for putting on this great trade, everyone's all upset because, for whatever reason, people have lots of opinions about Bitcoin. But this is a functioning commodity market, and it's not free money. To answer your last question, and I'm sorry for being on a soapbox here, but I've very emotionally activated at this issue. Residential demand response is a great idea. Currently, every Texas resident has the ability to opt into a retail electricity provider. So you have a freedom of choice here in Texas to enter into a contract with a retail electricity provider who then services electricity at your home. Because we have freedom of choice here in Texas and you can engage with a number of different providers, there are actually some contracts. I know of one contract, for example, that says we're going to give you free power overnight, and we're going to charge you twice as much during the day. What they're effectively trying to do is incentivize customers to install a battery system in their house, where they charge the battery overnight with their free power, and then they don't use any electricity during the day. It's a form of demand response. With better technology and smart home applications, there are likely pathways where we could automatically turn down thermostats on the hottest days. If you say, look, we're gonna do a little sauna hour for family time here tonight because daddy's getting paid $2 a kilowatt hour to shut down. Like, that's your family's decision, and you can do that. You can make it a fun family activity. But residential demand response is a great idea, and it will allow more power to come offline to better service those emergency weather situations. So support that, and also think I support a functioning commodity market here in the Texas power market.
All right, sounds good. I want to bring up another piece of legislation before we run out of time here, which is the effort in the Texas Senate to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve. I believe it's a crypto reserve, but as the bill was written, Bitcoin would be the only currency that would be eligible to be purchased. Professor, tell me tell me the idea about this. What are your thoughts? Does this bring any value to the state?
My thought is that it's not a good idea. And it's mostly about principle rather than whether to buy Bitcoin or not. I am in agreement that if you want to have a diversified portfolio, maybe you might also want to consider buying crypto. But I don't think it's the business of the government to take my money and decide how to invest the money in a fund. Whether it's Bitcoin or I don't want the government to take my money and invest them in Tesla or invest them in the S&P 500. So I think the role of the government is to provide services like roads, fire department, policemen, and then if they have extra money, just send it back to the people. And then they can decide whether to buy Bitcoin or not. The role of the government is not to be a hedge fund. The role of the government is to provide basic services to the people.
All right. One of the things, this would be a pretty small, relative to the state budget and the state investments. I think the number that was floated in a committee hearing earlier, or maybe last month, was around $21 million, which, when you compare it to a $156 billion budget is not a lot. But I'm curious, do y'all agree with that assessment that this is not the right use of state funds?
I'm not going to speak to the economics of it. I'm just going to say from a policy perspective, I think it's a positive sign for Bitcoin miners to see that Texas is positive about the idea of a strategic Bitcoin reserve. We spent the last couple of years being nervous that there could be laws that would be very anti-crypto or anti-Bitcoin. And so from that perspective, I think it's positive.
Well, that was actually a question that I wanted to ask is does it feel like there's been any kind of a shift in opinion across the state? I mean, in 2021, you were on a governor's commission, like exploring different ideas for how to use blockchain and crypto and things like that. The power conversation has obviously, the power demand spooked some folks. Does Texas feel as friendly as an environment to companies like yours, to initiatives like yours, as it did, 3 or 4 years ago?
I would say yes. The only thing that has really changed is that from 2021 to 2023, most of the broader Bitcoin and cryptocurrency industry was somewhat under attack in one form or another from the Biden administration. You had Operation Choke Point 2.0, which was the systematic debanking of cryptocurrency firms across the country. You had a number of different taxes and regulatory actions that were proposed against Bitcoin mining companies and Bitcoin mining energy usage. You had Gary Gensler, a very hostile Securities and Exchange Commission commissioner who was regulating through enforcement, not providing clear guidance to cryptocurrency companies, and generally just being antagonistic towards the industry. Texas was a haven during that time. Texas provided a clear regulatory framework, was supportive, and basically said, wave it in, let's bring it here and let's figure out how to regulate this. Now that is a position that's echoed by the president. So Texas is probably no longer the only safe place. I think cryptocurrency firms are now getting a wider lane of access to clear regulatory guidance and the ability to build predictable businesses. So Texas was an early leader and a pioneer in getting that framework done, and now we have the presidency. So it's a good time to be a cryptocurrency company in Texas and in the U.S. Versus 6 months ago, I would say.
All right, we're going to go to audience questions here in a second, but as Matt walks up, I'm going to ask you one last question, Professor. I mentioned you were on that governor's commission, explored a lot of different ways to use blockchain, crypto. Give me one idea for how the state government, aside from Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, could be using this technology.
I think that the best use of the technology is on payments. So we want to be able to pay with the most efficient, cheapest, and fastest way. So when you go and buy coffee, okay, so you have to choose, do I want to use cash? Do I use a credit card? Do I want to use my ATM card? So how do you go about choosing which method of payment to use? And unfortunately, the way laws are designed, you always have an incentive to use a credit card because a credit card gives you rewards back. And the reason is because you're going to still pay $5 for your coffee, regardless of whether you're paying with cash, debit card, or credit card. The problem is that the merchant, the coffee shop, is actually going to be charged by the credit card company a lot more when you use credit card instead of using debit card or cash. And so the biggest problem we have right now in the payment system is that we are not charging customers more if they actually make the merchant pay more for the payment system. And so my idea will be, I think that if we want to incentivize, so for example, crypto is a very efficient form of payment. But people are not going to use crypto to pay for coffee because I don't have an incentive to use the most efficient form of payment. I have an incentive to use my credit card. because they don't give me a surcharge. So in Texas, for example, it is illegal for a merchant to charge more if you pay with a credit card. And so I think it's important to actually change that law and say, we want to incentivize people to use the most efficient payment method.
All right, Matt, you want to?
All right, so we do have a few minutes for questions, and I'm going to try to group a couple of these because I think there's some that get to public perception. So Mary from Austin says, after attending an excellent presentation at the UT Business School, I became aware of the cost of scams due to cryptocurrency. China was the leader in that area, but they shut crypto down, and the US grew to become the new leader in losses due to scams. This and the use of crypto to launder money in such activities, many see crypto as a negative for society overall. Are the positives worth all of the negatives? And I'll just couple these because I think they're linked to this larger perception issue. Blockchain seems to be plagued by two big issues: the perception that it is all scams and the fact that AI is now the darling. What do you see as the future of blockchain given those two issues? And then how else do you, talk about where public perception is, and if that is pure perception, how you dispel some of those assumptions?
I can take this. So, Jamie said, crypto, you're your own bank. And that's true, and that's sometimes problematic because if you're your own bank, then if you get scammed, hacked, and so on, you lose all your money. For example, last Sunday, one of the largest crypto exchanges was hacked and they lost $1.5 billion. That's a lot of money. And the hacker was a North Korean actor. So clearly, now the reason, but at the same time, do you know why hackers use crypto? Because it's very efficient. It allows the movement of money without any problem from one country to the other. And so in a way, one of the reasons why crypto is used is because it works very, very, very well. And so in a way, we need to find a way to curtail and control all these scams and hacks, and at the same time leverage the benefit of crypto. So I don't think it's like either or, where like, well, the scams outweighs the benefit of crypto. I think we need to find the right legislation to protect consumers and at the same time improve the efficiency of the financial sector using a decentralized network.
Any other responses to that? If not, we'll go on to the next question.
No, I think you put it well. It's if you perceive there to be an additional risk of being scammed, then you should be cautious using crypto because it is a bearer asset, and much like if you carry around large quantities of gold or cash and store those things in your house, if you wear jewelry out in public, you are a target to people who might want to rob you, who might try to find ways to scam you, and they will scam assets that are the easiest to steal and keep. And that's the important part, is that if you have stocks in a brokerage account, a scammer is not going to be able to steal your stocks. They would need to go and sort of unwind a bunch of brokerage relationships and get that money through the banking system, and they'd be committing wire fraud and a bunch of other kind of fraud. With crypto, it's a great asset to steal because you get to keep it. So crypto assets should be used with caution, but it's because they're bearer assets, it enables a huge amount of features, such as being your own bank, sovereign ownership of it. Those are benefits, just in the same way that they make it more likely that you would be targeted for scams or theft.
I have a question here, and then Matthew, I don't know if you have anything you might want to close with. But yeah, a couple questions that also just show where people's knowledge, and I really appreciate some of these questions coming in, right? So in practical terms, please step me through the process. If I have $100 US, how do I buy Bitcoin, and how do I cash it out later?
I think the easiest way is to sign up to a centralized exchange. Kraken, Coinbase, and so on. You link your bank account. You move $100 into Coinbase or Kraken account, and you buy Bitcoin. And then if you want to sell it, you sell it. That's one way. That was the main way up until a couple of years ago. Now, if you have a simple brokerage account, Fidelity or Charles Schwab or E-Trade and so on, whatever, when you buy stocks, you can also buy a Bitcoin or a Ether ETF. So if you want to have exposure to crypto, nowadays you have a lot more venues to do it. You can use Robinhood. You can use SoFi. You can use any brokerage to buy an ETF or directly the Bitcoin.
So just want to mention here early in the conversation in the live stream, we had some disruptions, but for all those who have stuck through that and watched the program, we'll have the full program available later today at the Texas Tribune website. But with that, I have Matthew close the program.
All right. I think thank you all for being here. Thank you for the audience in the room and online, and for your excellent questions. It was a great conversation.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thanks.